How did you get your first feature film produced?
Oh, well, the first feature film produced was, once I partnered up with my wife, Laurence, and I was like working on, it's funny, I was going to do another short film. I've done a lot of short films ever since I was 10 years old doing short films. So I was going to do another short film. And I basically was getting frustrated because I couldn't really get the story, I couldn't cover the story I wanted to tell in the short film. It was getting too long. And then we did some tests in Super 8 and I wasn't happy with how it looked. And I realized, well, I really need to do it in 16, but the story's too long and it would cost too much money in 16 if we did the short because it won't make any money. So you're gonna lose all the money you put into it. And she's like, well, let's just make it into a feature. So once he kind of like threw down the gauntlet, we started working on the story and fleshing it out. And we did so many script passes on that while we were raising the money and putting the money together. And we got a great investor, Kendall Dreyer, who had never invested in a movie before, but he was very interested in us and he was interested in film. And we pitched him the story, and this is the story we want to tell. And he came on board as an investor, and we also invested as well with some money and also our time and energy to do it and sweat equity. And it took us a while. It was our first film. We shot over the course of a year. I was shooting at an old family farm, but I was living in Atlanta. So I was finishing my day job, getting in a car. We were driving 5 hours to the location, shooting all weekend, packing back up and coming back so I could go to work on Monday. So, and she was working as well at a TV station at the time. So we basically, except for 2 weeks, we were able to shoot a little bit, I think 14 days in a row, but the rest of it was all done like a day and a half at a time every week over the course of a year. So it was a long process.
So how does a first-time filmmaker, feature filmmaker, I realize you had shorts that you had made, convince someone who has never invested in a movie before to do so?
I think when you're doing your first one, if you're doing it the way we did, it was a very micro budget way. It was just more money because back then it's like you pretty much had to shoot film if you wanted it to look good at all. I mean, the digital revolution hadn't really reached the point where it could look so good. So we knew we wanted to shoot in 16, which of course with film stock and processing and transfer and stuff already gives you a certain budget level that you're gonna have to raise money. And I think for the first one, it's like, usually it comes from someone that that because they have to believe in you. So, it's hard to get someone to believe in you if you haven't done a feature yet, even if you have shorts. So I think it's someone who believes in you and someone who's interested in movies as well. And they also have money, but they're interested in movies and being part of that experience of a movie being made. Which Kendall was very involved. He actually played a role in the film as well.
Oh, nice.
Because we made him, because he was perfect for a role. It's like, you have to be in it. So we put him in it. But it was like a very homegrown, tight, very low budget, small crew, passion project. But it turned out really well. And we finished it and it got distributed in the US, but also got distributed overseas, around the world. So it was like for a first time film that we did on such a micro budget, it was like very successful experience. And it kind of led into the next two kind of pretty rapidly. It kind of kept going a little bit. And then the markets and everything changed a bit. And then you kind of had to learn how to ride that. Now it's like, I think in some ways it's easier to make a feature film because of the digital revolution and you can do things now on your home computer. You can get access to cameras that can shoot, and if you have the right DP and knows how to light it, and with the right expertise, it can look really, really good. So in that sense, it can bring down the cost. But on the flip side, it's much more challenging, I think, in terms of distribution where you make money. Now, in terms of distribution where you just get it out there, obviously there's a million ways to do that now. But in terms of making it go out there where you can make money so you can, get your cast and paid and your crew paid and everything else, or if you're paying them up front by the budget so you can get your investors' money back, it's much more challenging, I think, now. So it's kind of an interesting change. And before it was much more difficult and more expensive to make the movie, but if you could make the movie, distribution was much better. Now it's much easier to maybe make the movie, but distribution is much harder. So it's kind of been the slow change that we've seen over the course of making the 5 films. So it's interesting.
And do you think that's because sort of the collapse of the DVD market?
I think part of it is the collapse of the DVD market in the sense there aren't video stores anymore. And video stores kind of was this weird great equalizer, because your movie would be sitting on the shelf right next to a multi-million-dollar Hollywood movie, and you'd be on the same shelf in the new releases. And if your cover was good, someone might pick it up and read the back. And if the story sounded interesting and stuff, they may rent that movie and check it out. So it was a way of people finding out about your movie in the new release section of video stores in a very tactile way. Now, of course, you have it in VOD, but they're little tiny little croutons, and lots of times now placement is based more on the distributor and who has the muscle to get the better placement on the platforms, and there's all those things, and that makes it more challenging now that it's more of a digital world as opposed to physical media. And also, actually, I think it's more challenging in terms of because of piracy, and the biggest reason that's a challenge is world sales is more difficult now, because once your movie comes out anywhere, the movie will immediately be pirated. And all those countries know that the movie will be pirated. And it used to be, there was a very big physical separation between the different countries. So you would sell your movie in your different territories and everything was very separated. It's still separated now. But the issue is because of piracy, it breaks through all those borders. So it makes it much more difficult for buyers in those countries to pay you more money, because they know there's also going to be a pirated version around, because it just will. I mean, it just will happen. So I think that's made it, I think that's one of the reasons it's more challenging in terms of distribution. And yes, it goes back to what you were saying with DVDs, because it was a physical thing. It was a little harder to pirate. I mean, still piracy in physical DVDs and Blu-ray, you know, but it was harder because it was a physical tactile object. And a lot of people like to have the good art and the, you know, the good disc with the image on the disc, and it was something people like to own and have. And now that it's going to the digital realm, it's changing. It's a different thing.
What about the distribution deals? Were they much more in favor of the filmmaker before, or it's always been sort of a rocky?
I think they've never been really in favor of the filmmaker ever, unless you get to a certain point where you have certain clout or power. But I think the difference is because there's like less and less money coming into the pot. So it's still getting, it would still like get siphoned to this little amount you would give, but because less is pouring in, so that amount is smaller. You know what I mean? I think it's always like distributors, you know, they especially we're talking about the indie side, obviously it's very different than a big Hollywood movie. But on the indie side, the distributor would take less of the risk, and they don't really want to spend much money marketing the movie, and they make you pay to deliver everything to them. That's on you to pay everything and give them everything they need. So if it sells for them, great. If it doesn't sell really well, it's not really that much skin off their teeth, because they're still going to make a little bit of money. So in a way, it becomes more of a challenge to the filmmaker. Because before, there would be a little bit more of a distribution cost. So you could get maybe a little bit more marketing from the distributor. And it depends on the distributor, too. And like we talked about earlier, it's easy to make a movie now. And because of that, there's a lot more movies. Now, a lot of the movies aren't good, but they exist. And so, and then you can put a nice piece of cover art on it and stuff, and it looks like a movie until maybe you watch it and it's not that good. But it clutters the market. And so there's more of that, and people are willing to sell those sometimes like for nothing, and which, you know, so it's like all that kind of, it's difficult. It's always been hard, I think. It's just difficult. It's kind of like what's happening with the music industry for a long time, with the same exact thing when you started not selling CDs and records anymore as much, and more digital, and then it's streaming, and then there's less money coming from streaming because people aren't buying the movie a la carte, they're paying for a service. And so it's the same thing that kind of happened to music has been happening, you know, last 4 or 5 years more with movies. So it's the same challenging market, I think.
So with making your first feature film, because it was a passion project, you had this great investor, he was in the film, did that in some ways spoil your expectations? Because then it was such a wonderful experience, and whether it was difficult or not, it got made, and you had a good relationship with the person. Yeah. But then subsequent movies you thought were going to be that easy, and they weren't? I don't know, I'm just assuming.
I think every movie has like, it's like going to war, and it has its own unique challenges. So it's like, it's always different, and the challenges are always different, but it's never easy. Even though we had a great experience with the first film in terms of Kendall and him being an investor, it was still very little money, and it was very grueling shoot over the course of a year, and it was very tough. I mean, physically, it was really brutal. Thinking how we survived that shoot. So that was the challenge on that one. And then other ones, maybe you have more money, it's a little bit of an easier shoot, but then maybe your challenge is because of you're dealing with SAG, or you're dealing with a union type situation, or you're dealing with a distribution challenge or something, or a location challenge. So I think it varies from every movie. It's just different. But it's always challenging. I think any indie filmmaking, whatever the genre, I think is challenging.
But I mean, in terms of your personal view on how easy it was going to be, did that one sort of, I don't want to say spoil it because that sounds too negative, but did you have rose-colored glasses on for the longest time, thinking that we can do another one, and it's going to, yes, it'll be difficult, and I might have to drive 5 hours, and I have to work another job, and that sounds draining to me, just hearing about that. But in terms of actually getting investors and making things work, it actually wasn't that easy. That one was like a special, all the stars were aligned or whatever.
Well, that one was really special. I'm trying to think.
Like personally, did you think that everything was going to be that easy? And then,
it's weird because it didn't feel easy.
It didn't feel easy. Okay, it doesn't sound
easy. So actually, kind of was always hoping it to get a little easier. Our second film we also did with that investor, and that was Ghost of the Needle, and that was another great experience. Actually, production experience was actually really, really, really positive on that film. It had a little bit bigger budget, but then on the flip of it, we also had a really good foreign sales experience from that film, but we had a very negative North American distribution experience from it. So it started out feeling really, really good, and then it became kind of painful in the end because of distribution. Even though, like I said, overseas it was great. It came out in so many countries and did really good overseas. So it always feels like you're in a challenge where it's like, if this works out, then you have a problem here. If that works out, there's a problem there. And you just kind of have to roll with it, knowing that there's going to be these challenges coming. You don't know what they are sometimes. You just plan really, really hard and try to eliminate all the problems you possibly can. But you just know that things are going to pop up, and then you just have to deal with them. So as they come, I think Echoes of Fear is our new one, still in the festivals, and it won't come out till like fall 2019. So I don't know what's going to happen. But that was a great experience making it. Was a really great experience making the movie. But in terms of the distribution process, the only one that kind of went through the full cycle that was really great experience for us was Dark Remains, which is a different group of investors. Tony Click, I can't remember the other guy, David, can't remember his last name. But that was a great experience, making Dark Remains, and that worked, that sold nicely in the US and overseas. And it got a new life on VOD. It got picked up later when VOD became a better market. It got kind of re-released on the VOD platforms and the streaming, and that's been probably our most positive experience going through distribution. Hopefully, Echoes of Fear, our new one, we'll see what happens. But the response from the audience has been great to the film, and it's been doing an amazing, our biggest success in terms of festivals, because it's won 5 Best Feature awards. It's already done 8 festivals. I think it's going to be in 4 or 5 before it ends its festival run. And the audience response has been amazing. So obviously we have high hopes how that one's going to turn out. But you never know. You just get it out there, make the best film you can, and then you work hard to market and release it and see what happens.
Would you say you're an optimist?
I'm a realist, but I think you have to have a little bit of insane optimism to make an indie film. Because if you're really a realist, you probably would look at making an indie film and just go, no. And you would stop. So even though you're realistically, what to expect, you have to kind of have the optimism or the belief, or it kind of boils down to you have to make it. It's like you've got the story you really want to tell. My wife and I, we tell these stories together, and then eventually there's a point where it's like we really want to tell the story, so we got to make it happen. And then so in that sense, it's optimism, yes, because you just have to go, we're gonna do it, and then you kind of dive in and do it.
Were you always this way, or after making many short films and then features, then you realize like this is kind of the attitude I need to adopt? I need to be like a happy realist.
I don't know if it's happy, but I think it really comes from Laurence Lowe, my filmmaking partner. I think it really comes from her. She's very much into like you have to find your own path in what you're doing creatively, not worry about what other people are doing, not look at other people's success or lack of success and think about that. You just have to, you have to follow your path, believe in what you believe in, and then just do it. And so I take great inspiration really from her, because she's very much like, even from going back to the first film, I'm like, oh, I really want to make a feature film. I'm not sure how. And she's like, well, just do it. And, and she's always been like that in terms of just finding a way to make it happen. So I think probably from her.